Hello friends, welcome to the show. This evening I've had the privilege of talking to the frontman for the Dunedin band 3 Quarter Marathon, a very talented guitarist and drummer and singer. He's a good all-rounder. I know you guys know him and love him. Please welcome Reuben Scott.
Home Audio Entertainment.
9016 Radio.
The show for artists of all kinds.
Sit down and relax. Enjoy the music.
Oh, okay, it's your turn.
This is something that I've wondered about in podcasts, actually.
Breaks.
Yeah, because you're drinking a lot of water, to keep your mouth
Exactly, yeah.
in order.
I listened to the latest Joe Rogan one with Duncan Trussell, and that was 5 hours. And Duncan went to the bathroom like 3 or 4 times. He's just like, can I pee? Like, I need to pee. And Joe's like, yeah, just go and do it. But Joe didn't pee for like 4 hours. He was like, I really need to piss. And it was like 4 hours into it. I was like, how the fuck do you do that? That can't be good holding your pee in.
That's crazy. Did you
Yeah,
see
I had to do it a few times.
Did you see the David Blaine one where he's drinking like?
Yeah, dude. That was
the amount of water.
That was actually quite like hard to listen to with like headphones in because it's so like glugging, and especially when he was like spinning it all back up as well. It was like, I think this is more of like a watching podcast than a listening podcast.
Did you just listen to it? Did you?
Yeah.
No video.
No,
Yeah.
I kind of did a bit of both. Like I was in and out of home in the studio, and I watched like the start of it at home, and then listened to it as I was out and about, and then sort of watched bits. But I mainly listened to the whole thing. So all of the stuff he was doing was like listening to it. And I was like, oh, this is really weird to listen to.
Yeah, and
There was
I
so many
remember
gaps in it as well.
I remember Joe saying at points like, you should, if you're just listening, you should probably watch this video.
Yeah, kind of didn't make any sense to
Yeah.
not do it, but you kind of got the gist of what he was doing. And yeah, the point where he was putting the ice pick through his arm, it was like, yeah, this is not something to listen to, because I kind of knew what was happening, but I kind of didn't. So I listened to that and then went home and got to the point where they did that and watched him do it. And I was like, oh, Jesus Christ.
Yeah.
Like, wouldn't let anyone do that to me, put a fucking pin through my arm. That was real.
Pretty crazy.
Pretty dodgy stuff.
Yeah.
Because like if you were to like even if it doesn't do any harm, like the way he's doing it, like there's just so much shit like in there. Surely you hit something if you just let someone randomly do it for you. It was a bit cringe.
Yeah, the desire to like want to
To do
just
that.
well to do that. I mean, I know that he's in it for the reaction and like to amaze people. But I mean, it's just it takes a special kind of person to want to like put themselves through that,
Yeah.
and like get some kind of joy out of it.
Yeah,
I suppose.
for sure. He's an interesting guy, and like I haven't really known much about him, and like how he actually is as a person, because like you see sort of how he is creatively in like the videos that he's in, and he's sort of very straight faced, like serious guy. But then hearing him on that long talk with Joe, you get like an actual personality out of him. But I think it's just one of those weird things where you're just sort of fascinated, I suppose, by things like that. And it just, I don't know, it's very odd. He's like, that sort of stuff's not really magic. It's just sort of knowing like what the body can do, I suppose. And I guess he doesn't really call that magic, so to speak. But like he did that there's quite a few videos on YouTube with him doing that ice pick trick in his hand with like celebrities. I don't know if you've seen any of those clips, but he's got like 3 party cups like set up or whatever it is, or paper bags or something, with the ice pick sticking up like underneath one of them. Yeah. And he sort of like slaps his hand. They get him to pick which one it is, and he slaps his hand. But he never actually does it. Like I think he somehow knows which one that's actually in at any given time. So he never actually does it and goes through his hand or anything. Because that probably would do some damage, because you can't really plan where it's going to hit. So there's some skill in that. But then afterwards he takes it and puts it through his hand anyway. So he sort of just explains it. Yeah. And there's obviously just points in like your flesh, obviously in any part of his body. I think he was saying he can do it really anywhere. You just have to know like how to actually do it. And I think there's something about an ice pick where like it's not like a needle. I feel like if you did it with a needle, it's sharper and it actually sort of rips the skin as the needle goes in. Whereas with an ice pick, I think because of the shape of the end of it, it's sort of like like a needle, you've sort of got like the sliced end. Yeah. So that's piercing the skin. Not that the ice pick isn't, but I think the shape of it, because it comes all around to like a fine point, like the pressure is sort of just like, I don't know how to explain it, but I think it has to be done with an ice pick. I don't think he could do it with any other sharp thing.
Doesn't it?
Yeah. Oh, it definitely seems worse. And like they're thicker as well. Like there's a
Yeah.
lot of it going through. But that might mean that it's sort of like, because it all comes tapered to a point, it might actually sort of push veins and nerves and things aside as it goes through.
That's a
This is
horrible
just my
thought.
theory. I know it sounds disgusting, but like if it was a needle, the point of a needle was to go in and pierce the vein, right? So that sharp
Yeah,
end
I see what you
is
mean.
piercing the skin and finding a point, making contact and going inside, whereas the ice pick might actually like deter bits inside you to actually like, that's why he can sort of go right through, and that's why it doesn't bleed either.
Is he the first to have done something like that?
No,
or has
no,
he
I
taken it
think
from...
I think he talked about it in their podcast actually. I think he had seen it from, because there was a video that they'd pulled up from this guy way back in whatever year it is, like centuries ago, where he was doing it through like his whole body. Like he'd get people to like push this thing right through him, and he'd have it coming like out of his stomach and like
Wow.
through his ribs. And there's obviously points in the body where there's nothing that you can actually like get it, so it probably had to be pretty precise. But again, it might be that theory, like they might have even pierced organs, but it's just so like done in such a slow way and with a particular tool that it, I don't
really-
actually know the science
Have
behind
to
it. This
really
is just my theory.
study
like,
up, eh?
Yeah, it's pretty gory stuff. Like actually watching that is not super enjoyable, and like it's just the scare factor that you get from it, rather than like amazing people. You're sort of like putting people on edge, which is sort of, I guess, part of the whole show. But
I think it like it not being magic and it being like, you know that it's real.
yeah,
I guess that's kind of the draw to watch it,
yeah, there's definitely
even though
more,
you're closing your eyes most of the time.
yeah, for sure. Yeah, that sort of stuff, like as freaky as it is, doesn't really amaze me, so to say, because like I sort of think about when it's that, like when he's just putting something through his hand, there's like a logistical explanation for that. You know,
Right.
you can see, well, he's obviously just either, you know, trained his body or figured out parts where that's not going to damage him. Whereas like when you do a card trick, I saw him do a trick where he sort of dishes out a certain number of cards to the guy, and the guy holds the cards up to his chest, like sort of under a shirt. And then he says like, pick another card, and whatever that number is, he makes that amount of cards like appear in the amount that he's holding in his hand. So that to me is more like amazing, because it's like, well, how the fuck did you get the
it's the
cards
unknown,
in
right.
there where the guy's holding, you know? And the only logical way I can sort of get past that is to think that that guy just has to be involved with it, surely. Like, surely he's got something, because his hand was under his jacket, so it's like, you must have something there that you're generally, there's no way you can just throw a card and it just appears underneath someone's
Yeah,
hand,
right.
you know? So that's more, you know, quote unquote magic to me, because it leaves you wondering. So I'm more surprised by that stuff rather than someone just like
I think he's
piercing something through their whole body, you know?
I think he's more about the shock
Oh,
factor.
for sure. Yeah.
I think wanting to like, I don't know, just sort of amaze people and disgust people.
Yeah. All comes under the one type of person, I suppose. He just, I haven't actually seen it yet, but I watched a preview video for his trick. I say trick, but it's more of like I don't even know what you call it, but he's done another.
Oh, it's like a special. Right,
Yeah,
or something
yeah.
like that.
It's a special they've organised with YouTube, I think, where he ascends with balloons. So he has a whole bunch of balloons tied to his hand, and he just sort of floats away, which doesn't sound super crazy to me. Seeing that, I'm sort of like, well, seems like there's a lot of logic going into it, and it obviously has to be done a certain way. Like those sort of tricks don't really grab me as much, because again, it's like, as cool as that is, or as cool as it can look, like there's sort of an explanation behind it. So it's more just like, holy shit, you're doing this thing,
Yeah.
rather than being like, how did he do that thing, you know?
Right, it's just finding someone that's willing to
Yeah, exactly.
hold
But
the balloons.
There's a whole team of people working on it. Like there's people figuring out how like high he can go, or how long he can be in a certain place or for a certain time, and like how do you sort of, I guess, fail safe it. Like if worst case scenario he does like somehow let go and he's not wearing like a parachute or anything, so how do we like save him, sort of thing? Because like you can't, there comes a point where you have to think of it ethically, you know, you have to figure out what it is, or the things that have to be done in that scenario to make it ethical, you know. Like yes, it's very risky and he could potentially die, but you're not going to let David Blaine die, surely, you know, especially if you're doing like a special with YouTube. If he ends
Yeah.
up dying doing this trick, you've got no special, you know,
And I suppose,
that's in
like,
man's life.
I mean, you're expecting them to succeed because they've got all those fail safes. Like, I forget the guy's name, but it was not too long ago, the guy that did like the longest free fall.
Haven't heard that one.
Of all time, and he was, I mean, he's pretty much in space, you know.
Jesus.
And he jumps and he's falling for like minutes.
Yeah.
And it was all over the news, and I just remember being a little bit like, it's amazing, but like you say, it's almost underwhelming because like you're expecting him to succeed. Like they're not going to let it fail.
Yeah. It's weird because that's exactly it. You know, if you know there's things in place to save that person, then it's not as amazing. You know, like the feat itself is crazy to think about. Like you'd never go up that high and jump out of a plane. You know, but there's a fine line. I think the stuff that David Blaine does when he's you know, when he's underwater for a certain amount of time, and like I think he froze himself for like a couple of days or something as well, or something like that. Like that's just scary. It sort of passes a point where it's enjoyable to watch, but it's just like, how do you do that? How do you actually? But he's just figured out ways to. He follows a lot of, I think, Wim Hof. If you know who Wim Hof is,
I don't know.
Basically, I don't know a lot about him either, but he's just a guy that's very into like sort of pushing the body to its extreme. So sort of figuring out how long you can, you know, be submerged in ice cold water, and you know, just straining out things in the body so you can basically have like superhuman capabilities, sort of thing. So I think David Blaine takes a lot of what he has learned from this Wim Hof guy, and so again, it's like that's amazing that you've trained your body to do that, but it's just the logic thing for me. Like, I'm not trying to say these things aren't amazing, because they are, but it's like, okay, well, we understand why you're able to do that. I guess just the amazing part is that he has taken the time to learn to do that. He's put his body through the test to be able to do these things, and that's an admirable thing. But I still get more amazed by like a card trick than I do those sorts of things, you know?
And I think it's also like just seeing the result that's a little... that's less satisfying. Like, sure, sometimes the process is like the interesting part.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know, I'm thinking about something like, you know, the show like Mythbusters. When that was a really big show, and like you're in it for watching like how they figure these things out, how they achieve it, and you know, and then they go on to achieve like the amazing thing, and like that's not necessarily the best part.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, that's so true. And that's why I think Mythbusters is such a successful show, is because people want to know how people have done these things, you know, and getting the logic. Like, everyone wants to know how a magic trick's done. That's probably the question a magician gets asked the most is, oh my God, how did you do that, you know? So we want to be able to know why these people can do these things. So that's exactly it. People want to figure out how it's actually done. And sometimes it's just a super simple answer. Yeah. And you're like, oh, okay, right. Well, I could probably do that. But it's just, you know, sleight of hand tricks and like sort of, you know, making people forget things or taking their attention away from that sort of thing. It's just, there's so many parts to play, I think, in the stuff that they do, you know?
Yeah. I really enjoyed the formula, the Mythbusters formula. Like they would always, like they had a goal, and then they would try and achieve it in the way that the myth said. And then if they figured out that it couldn't be done, they would go, all right, what do we have to do to achieve it? And they would like, you know, that's when they start like exaggerating. Yeah. Like, you know, the amount of explosives or like the speed that you need to go and all this sort of thing.
Yeah. And that's a lot of what they have to do, because I think a lot of the myths that they were busting, I haven't seen a lot of the show to get a full grasp on it, but I get the concept. But a lot of the things that they're trying to replicate are usually things that have sort of been overdone for theatrical purposes anyway. Like it's usually something from a movie where like there's so many times you see explosions in movies that are just like seriously, like, that can't be that big of an explosion sort of thing. And not that is exactly something that they might have been myth busting, but it's like sometimes you do have to go over and above to really get the result. And sometimes I bet there's probably myths that they solved on that show that like it was kind of underwhelming. They sort of got to the end and were like, this isn't really like a TV show, you know. So it might do something to add to it, but this is coming from someone who knows next to nothing about Mythbusters. But anyway, appreciate you coming on, man. Congratulations on your singles that came out yesterday.
Oh, thank you.
They're really nice. Have it been something you've had in the works for a while?
Not overly long. Like the songs were written pretty much during lockdown, and they're not like completely divorced from like lockdown. Like
Sure.
the song Bet 100 is partly about being in Queenstown in like that rural environment.
Sure.
And like missing the city. You know, missing like the chaos and, you know, the streets, like the fumes.
Yeah.
Things like that. So it's, you know, they're relatively new, and I like that we were sort of able to throw them together pretty quickly.
Yeah.
And then, you know, now they're out, and yeah, the response has been pretty good, I think. So
Yeah, I think being part of Garbage and having that little mini organisation of people posting stuff is super helpful. You know, whenever you guys release something or Jack Bear releases something, you get flooded with it, and it's like, that's such good exposure, you know, and so good to be able to, you know, hype your friends up and get that sort of movement when stuff gets released. You know, you're not just sort of expecting something to come out of nowhere. You know that people are behind you, like pushing your stuff too, which is cool.
yeah, it's fantastic. Like, I mean, you know, we obviously try and like push it ourselves and like plug ourselves, but it's almost like, you know, we can just sort of sit there and like everyone's just, the support is.
That's fantastic. That's
is
cool to
amazing.
be able to sit back and let it sort of do its thing once it's out there, you know, like you've done your work, so it's nice to see work being done for you in the post process, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
definitely.
what's your typical sort of like length of time when it comes to this sort of like getting a track from start to finish for you guys? Like we were talking about before about how you guys are in 3/4 are close friends and have been for a huge portion of your life. So presumably like the content that you're making, the music that you're making comes together on its own fairly quickly because you guys have the dynamic and you've got a workflow. But getting that sort of to its end result, does that get quite strenuous, or can you find you do get a result fairly quickly?
We can figure things out pretty quickly.
Yeah.
These days. I mean, the songs are mostly they pretty much entirely come from me.
Yeah.
And then like I come with something that's pretty much finished, and I'll show the guys, and I'll say to Utah and Theo, like, you know, do something like this, and then they'll kind of put their own spin on it. So like the whole, you know, once we're in that band room and the song's there and it's just kind of like us learning it basically, that only really takes like an afternoon. You know, we can usually get it done in a day.
Okay.
But I mean, the writing is like a whole nother thing. Like that can take anywhere from, you know, 15 minutes to like a month.
Sure.
You know.
Yeah. Does that come quite easy to you to come up with lyrics? Or do you find, like, I suppose, as cheesy as the question is, like, where does your inspiration come? Do you find you're just good with words, or is there sort of like themes that you're trying to relay and you sometimes struggle to put that into a lyric
it
format?
can be tricky. It can be really tricky. I struggled with these songs actually a lot more than usual, because I guess they're a little bit more like poppy than we would normally go. Like
Sure.
there's this like these, you know, specific A-B melodies, like verse chorus type thing. And especially with Bet 100, I had this melody that was like really dictating what the words were going to be. Like I had that line, you know, don't you want to know how I've come to be?
Yeah.
And like as soon as I was writing it, I started singing that straight away, and I couldn't get that out of my head, and so I basically had to write the song around that line, and it took me ages to figure out like what that's asking, like what am I supposed to say?
Right.
What am I supposed to sort of figure out?
Does that become like a sort of a writer's block, so to speak? Like, is it?
No, it's not a block. I think it's like a puzzle. It's just
Sure.
like trying to figure it out.
How it fits into the thing in the grand scheme of it.
Yeah. But I mean, it's different for everything. Like, I write poetry separate to music most of the time, and so when I've got a new, like a riff or a chord progression or something like that, I usually just go to the poems that I've got,
Sure.
and just try and find what fits.
Yeah.
And you know, there's usually a little bit of surgery involved in that.
Yeah.
But yeah, they're mostly like separate things, and then you just kind of bring the two together.
I imagine it's easier for you to come up with a riff than it is to come up with a poem or lyrics, you know. Are you mainly, is that the main process for you, getting those things together, a sort of riff first, lyrics second?
Yeah.
I suppose it could go both ways.
It
but
can go both
I can
ways.
imagine if you're comfortable on a guitar, you can really pull sort of melodies out as long as you know what key you're in, sort of thing.
Yeah, it can go both ways, but what seems to normally happen is I'll come up with like half a song, like like a riff and like a sort of a sound, and then I'll turn to the words
Yeah.
and just try and figure out what fits, and then it all comes together sort of simultaneously at the end. But it's never. I don't know. There's no one answer
For sure,
Like
yeah.
I'll spend the rest of my life trying to figure out how to write a song.
Absolutely,
Like
yeah.
there's no.
And like you say, it's going to be different for each song. You're going to have one source of inspiration that brings up an idea that's going to be completely different from something that you've done in the past, and
Yeah.
it kind of what makes the end result what it is. It's come from a different process each time. You're not really getting the same thing every time. It might be sort of a similar core structure, but all in all, it's really what makes something unique. Is where it comes from. Yeah.
And I'm guilty for being like very, very easily inspired by something. Like I'll listen to a band that sounds nothing like us.
Yeah.
And I'll go, man, I want to do something like that.
Sure.
Like I was listening to Idols on the way here, like, this Bristol punk band. And I was thinking like, man, I want to be like that.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, we're not like that. Like how,
Right.
what am I supposed to do with that? And that happens all the time. Like you listen to, different genres of music, even from like films and stuff.
Yeah.
But it never, I don't know, it always finds its way to like sound
Right.
like us.
So you still have a core idea of what three-quarters music is like. So that's interesting. You say you listen to something that's inspiring you, but you say it's not like what you are. Are you? I guess you're trying to take something from that though. Still, like you don't want to copy that, but you've obviously got an idea of what the music in three-quarters got to be like.
It's usually like like an energy,
Right.
or like with Idols, it was more like a lyrical theme or something like that. Like I want to say something like that. But it's never. Like you say, I've got an idea with what three-quarter is. It's never going to be like we're going to write this, minute and a half
Sure.
super fast punk song, because
Yeah.
that's like not really what we do.
Right. So you don't want to deter from that too much. You want to keep it sort of on a general theme of things. Do you find that if you were to sort of to dive into a different genre, then it wouldn't be three-quarter anymore? Or do you just think that could be like a new pathway you go down?
No, I just think it would happen naturally.
Sure.
I think I don't think it would come from like a sudden moment of like, oh, we should do that. I
Yeah.
think it would just sort of happen naturally, and it already sort of has. I've found, like with the new singles that we just put out.
Yeah.
I feel like it's a little more refined than it's been in the past, and it's like the songs are like shorter and tighter. And so I think if we're gonna change, then like it's not gonna be a conscious decision, really.
Sure. The creative flow just ends up taking in that direction. Yeah, that makes sense. Do you think that like as a band here in Dunedin, like I suppose you personally, because you say the music really comes from you, do you think that you're limited in any way? Like, do you think there's more that you could do, or are you pretty much like the end result is what you're happy with and you're doing things the way that you want to? Like, do you think there's anything that could be brought to the table that would help you, like whether it's being in like a different city or having a different tool available to you?
I think, I don't know, honestly I don't think so. Like I think I feel like wherever I am, it's gonna sound the way it sounds. I always go back to the same like chords and like the same like themes usually, and the same like kind of stories, and so I don't think I can't imagine that I'd be greatly influenced by like moving or anything like that. Like I was writing songs when I was living in Auckland when I was like way younger, but I think that when I did eventually move to Queenstown, I think that it was just like a natural. The songwriting process was kind of unaffected, I think.
Sure.
Maybe lyrically, like, but for the most part, I think the sound is just because the sound, like I'm always listening to music and I'm like learning about it, and that doesn't change wherever I am.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, that makes sense. I can't imagine that you would really have anything change immensely. But like, I suppose, yeah, I guess my question is like the music scene here and what you're able to do here. Like, you seem like you're in a pretty comfortable position. I feel like the band is doing like sort of what you wanted to be doing in the city. And like back to our point about having the friend group and the you know, the Garbage label to be able to promote you, it's in a pretty good spot. Not that that would change if you were to move cities, but you know, it's cool to have that Dunedin dynamic. And I guess like you guys are pretty well known here, so it's pretty good exposure for you.
Yeah, I think
I can't. Sorry, carry on.
No, I was just going to say. I mean, I think you're right. I think we're lucky, and I think we're just going to sort of ride it out for a little bit longer and make the most of what we can here.
Yeah. As far as like all the COVID stuff aside, like to be able to get gigs and things lined up and play shows when you want, is that pretty easygoing? Do you get a lot of help from Garbage in that regard? Like you wouldn't feel like you had to have more opportunities in a different city, I guess?
No, we do. We do get a lot of. I mean, most of our help from Garbage. Like the tours that we have had booked recently, we had 2 like semi-booked, one fully booked, one semi-booked, both cancelled.
Yeah.
But they were all organised by Garbage Presents, which was Tane.
Yeah.
And you know, I don't think I could have done any of that without him.
Yeah.
Or without those guys, you know, Damon
awesome.
and everyone. I mean, we can put on shows in Dunedin ourselves. I feel like we know the venues and we know other bands, and we can like sort out, you know, who's going to be on door and who's opening and all that kind of thing. But those further reaching like tours, we definitely wouldn't be able to do it.
Yeah.
Without the group.
That helps. I can imagine that will help immensely, because it almost feels like the working process is never done if you're constantly working to create the content and get it finished to the way you want and get it out there, and then you have to organise yourself how you're going to get the music you've played to be performed and where you have to go. Like it just never ends. It's nice to be able to do the work that you want to be doing and then get to a point where it's done and you've got someone else that's like, right, this is awesome, let's get you guys here and here and here, you know, because taking that workflow out of it means you could probably put more time into the creative side of things, I presume.
Yeah, it's I mean, you know, that's what every successful artist band is doing. You know, they go through the album cycle and then they release it and then they tour the album and then they might take a little bit of time off, but then they'll go back to the studio. And I mean, we've all got other things going on, you know, uni and work and that kind of stuff. But it is sort of like a version of that. You know, we'll put out a few songs and then just try and like perform them and play as many. You know, usually summer we'll go out, play as many shows as we can, and then just go back into thinking about furthering our music, making more.
That's awesome, man.
Yeah.
When you are coming up for an idea for a song, like when you have the general, I was going to say plot, but I guess theme for the song, how much influence comes from Theo and Utah and that? Like, are they sort of like, right, you've got the idea, let's go? Like you say, that influenced a lot of the music. How different does the end result end up being from the initial idea that you've got? And is that something that you look forward to, having influence from those guys? Or you really have like a solid, you know, tunnel vision as to where you want the song to end up?
Like musically, it's like I have an idea of what I want it to sound like, you know. I mean, I'm a drummer as well, so like I tell Theo, like, you know, I mean, it must kind of suck for him in a way. Like, I'll tell him, like, you know, do something like this, and I know pretty much exactly what I want. Yeah. But he'll do it in his own way and in ways that I would have never thought of, just because like we're different people. And a lot of the time, it's like it's better. It's, you know, it sounds like 3/4 Marathon. It's like, oh, I would never have thought of doing that.
Right.
And so that's something that I'll never be able to predict, I guess. Like, and that's the exciting part about like having a song that in my head is pretty much finished, and then taking it to the band room and it ends up being something like that
gets amplified.
Yeah, it's a little bit different. It's changed in a way. Like the song is still, you know, the song. Like it means a certain thing, and it's, you know, it's got a certain feeling, but it sounds, you know, like different people playing it, I guess.
This might be a tricky question, but I'm no musician, but the times that I have played around with music is of a certain genre, sort of, what's the word I'm looking for? Structured in a certain way. So like with hip hop music, there's typically a certain structure to how that music comes together. Whereas in a live band, and that style of music that you guys play, I don't want to define your genre, but yeah, there's so much that goes into how it's actually performed. Like when I listen to Bet 100, like there's so many stops and goes and sort of bits that, you know, you sort of unexpected in a way, and the structure is really sort of thrown around a lot. Like there is structure, but it's different to how I'm used to. I sort of just wonder, like, how do you even think of like the drum roll doing this, or like the guitar stopping at this point and coming at this point? Like, does that just come from like the organic playing it together, and you just sort of know you've gotten to the end of 4 bars and you just do a re-roll, that sort of thing? Sorry if that's a difficult question, but it just
there is a little
amazes
bit
me.
of that. Like, there are times where we're playing, where we're just sort of jamming, and like, I don't
It's
know,
hard
like
for me to verbalize like the
I know,
part of the song.
I know what
Yeah.
you're saying though.
Yeah.
But there are times that we'll be in the band room and we'll just be playing, and I don't know, me and Theo we'll do the same thing. Like we'll do this weird stop, or
Sure.
we'll like go into the section that's like we're kind of on the same page. And you know, Utah as well. Like we kind of have this like almost like a singular brain as a band. Like we've been playing so long, together for so long now. But I think like with the songwriting, it's like all of those, I know what you mean, like all those like intricate little spots, like little drum rolls and stops and all that kind of stuff. There's like, I don't know, it's almost like luck when I figure it out. It's like, you know, I'll just be sort of playing it on my own in my bedroom or something, and I'll do it, and then it just sounds good, and it's like, I don't know how I decided to do that. It was almost just like, it's almost like lucky that I thought of doing that.
Yeah, it's an organic thing.
Yeah.
Seems to make more sense that way, you know, if you, with you guys all being musicians, you know, points at which, you know, something like a verse ends or a chorus starts or whatever it is, that you sort of know to sort of add something into the mix to make it, you know, I guess change it up and make it flow a bit differently. I just find it very interesting, like the way that kind of music is recorded, because it's just sort of very far away from anything that I'm familiar with in the realm of music. Because, you know, to me, forming like a hip hop beat, or, you know, within that genre, trap music, that sort of thing, it's very easy to structure. And I think a lot of it is down to the fact that it's done electronically a lot of the time as well. You're not really live making a hip hop beat unless you've got the right gear. But for me, it was really just drawing things in and you know, seeing the structure, where for you guys, it's obviously way more organic, and you sort of, it sort of comes, it's free flowing, so it makes for a better track in the end, I suppose. Like, not to say that one genre is better than the other, but it just comes in a different way that you end up with such a different result. It's just very interesting. I'm not used to listening to the type of music that you guys perform.
Yeah.
So for me, it's very exciting, like listening to the music that you you know, produce, because it's just, yeah, it makes me wonder, I suppose, is the point of it. I just sort of think, how have you guys like orchestrated that? It's just crazy to me how like.
Yeah, well, I
songs
mean, it
come
must
together.
be like, I mean, because you don't listen to that kind of stuff often, it's, I don't know, it must, I can imagine like it might surprise you, like those certain changes and like different sections and like a structure that's not, I don't know, normal.
Yeah.
But it does all come from like, I mean, I listen to a lot of music that sounds kind of like what we do.
Of course.
And so it all comes from somewhere. Like, you know, every idea that we have is not like, I don't know, I'm not like, what we're doing is not completely new. Like it's, you know, it's sort of been done before, but I just like to think that it's like, you know,
Yeah,
it's got a bit of our,
you still.
yeah, it's got a bit of our own like personality on it, but it's not free from what's come before. Like it's, you know, it's influenced by, you know, 100 different things.
For sure. Oh, it's probably too much to really put into words, isn't it?
Yeah.
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 How long have you been playing guitar for? And drums, evidently.
It's, I don't know, maybe since I was about sort of 10. It's hard to say. I started with guitar, and that was sort of a slow process. And then maybe a few years later, me and my dad decided that we were going to learn to play the drums together. Like it was going to be something that he was going to buy a drum kit and then we're both going to learn how to do it. And I don't think I ever saw him sit down and try and play the drums. It was just kind of something that I did.
Yeah.
But, to be honest, I picked up the drums like really, really quickly. And I think it was because I'd already been playing guitar and like I was just listening to music.
Yeah. And there's obviously music in your family. Your dad's obviously a musician as well.
Dad's a guitar player, and he used to play in bands in Auckland, mainly like blues music. He's a guitar guy. He loves things with guitar solos in them,
Sure.
and his guitars all around the house.
That softer sort of stuff.
Softer,
I suppose.
yeah,
I guess
softer.
blues is-
I think 3/4 too heavy for him.
Right.
I think he doesn't.
You haven't had an honest opinion yet.
No, I think he prefers not to say.
Sure.
But at the same time, like when I was really, really young, he showed me Green Day, and like he bought me Green Day CDs, and he loved Green Day. So like I kind of wonder like
It's got to be something.
It's not really that far off
No.
from what we're doing.
Yeah. Well,
But-
it's not blues,
Exactly, exactly. But no, definitely a lot of music in the house,
Yeah.
and
It's interesting trying to get like a honest perspective about what you do creatively from your parents, because I feel like they're sort of biased or inclined to say that they like it. But do you feel that way? You feel like sometimes you're like, tell me how you really feel, Dad.
nah, I'd rather, because I know what their tastes are like, and I sort of know that it's not going to resonate.
Sure.
Like my mum, she's not really musical at all. Like
Yeah.
she just kind of loves everything that I do, which is nice. But there's that saying like you should never show your mum your first draft because she's going to love it.
Yeah,
And
of
it's like,
course.
it's
yeah.
not helpful.
That's so true, eh?
Um,
But like you kind of need that sometimes. You need someone that like whether it's good or not, you want someone to say that to you. But yeah, you definitely need like some real feedback. Otherwise, you sort of end up on a path of, I guess, being complacent,
Yeah.
And it depends how, I guess, you view your stuff creatively as well. But it's nice to have a wee pick-me-up every here and there.
Yeah, and I mean, I guess that's another perk of having like the whole group that we've been talking about down
for
here.
sure.
Is I send Damo like half-finished things every now and then, and it helps to have like someone who's in the same sort of field as you, just to kind of get that conversation going about like what you're doing.
Yeah.
But no, I never really talked to my parents about like the music that I make or anything like that, because it's difficult to imagine that they would understand.
Yeah. Yeah. It's hard to, like I say, hard to gauge like a real answer from them, because like I've experienced that quite a bit with art and that sort of thing as well, is you get with parents in particular, like yes, they're going to support you and they're going to like what it is that you do, but yeah, sometimes like I've even said to like my parents sometimes like tell me how you really feel about this. Like sometimes you do want someone especially close to you to just say that they don't like something. Like I would much rather someone say to me, oh, that's not really my thing, like I appreciate the work you put into it, but it's not really my cup of tea. I'd much rather someone say that to me than be like, oh yeah, that's great, like that's fantastic, or I like this bit, and sort of pick random bits out of it to say that they enjoy. And it's like you can sort of tell a lot of the time, and I think parents, you sort of have to have a wee bit of leeway, because you want them to support you, and
sure.
they're sort of your fail-safe people for supporting you in that manner, so you want them to do that. But there's times where I'm going, I think I know how you really feel about that, but you got to take it.
I mean, I definitely experienced that a lot more with poetry, because that's something that I've been doing like a little bit of throughout uni.
Yeah.
And so we're made to like present poems and like hand in poems, and like and so we have teachers that and tutors that have said pretty bluntly, like
They've got to mark you.
They've got to mark you, like you haven't really achieved what we think you're aiming to do. And some of the time I'll totally disagree, and I'll go, that's cool, I think it's great, I'm going to keep it. But it is also good to have people that really know what they're doing.
Yeah,
or,
absolutely. Yeah, proper critique.
Have experience in something.
Yeah, and poetry, like, I suppose perhaps is a bit more personal, and like the difference between music, or well, I suppose music applies to music as well, but just like the spoken word and like the actual literal writing of an expression or something is much different from looking at something and forming an opinion based off that. So like, you know, in a poem or a lyric or whatever, you can quite literally address a certain thing rather than try and portray something in a way that it is, you know, supposed to be perceived. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like I feel like if I was writing poetry and it was something very intimate and personal, I would struggle a lot more to share that with someone if it was, you know, not to say that all your poetry is personal. I don't know anything about that, but you know, I can imagine the word format is a lot more, you can sort of, anyone can really take meaning from it in the literal sense rather than sort of gauging a concept from nothing, you know.
I know what you mean. And like, I don't know, whenever I read something of like pretty substantial length, like a novel or something, I don't know, novels always amaze me just because it's like, it's, you know, every single word they've like picked out, they've put there, and it's just like you're in this person's brain for like however many hours it takes you to read a novel, like 7 or 8 hours or something, and you're like in the author's brain like for such a long time. And you know, with poetry it's like, I don't know, you might read it, you know, in, I don't know, a couple minutes, something like that, but you are still you know, in that person's brain. And like you say, it doesn't have to be personal, but it has come from them. And it's like, you know, even if they're telling a story about like, you know, these characters doing things that this author's never done before, like it's still coming from
still feelings and emotions.
Yeah, it's still coming from their experiences.
Yeah. So interesting. I'm very useless when it comes to words, and it does amaze me when someone comes through with a poem that's, you know, quite intense, I suppose, or like, I'm not much of a reader. You just said it takes, you know, it can take someone 7 to 8 hours to read a book. Is that how you read books?
No, not in one go.
I was going to say, holy crap, that's quite impressive.
No, not at all. I might read for like, I don't know, maybe half an hour, 40 minutes a night, something like that, and then put it down.
I struggle to. I think it might just be something that I sort of have to train myself to do. Like, I want to read. I have this idea that I want to read books, and I have so many books there, but I just can't. Like, I think my attention span is just too short. Either that, or I'm just reading like not so great books. But I struggle to really sort of stay still, I suppose, and really engage with the story. And I find that my mind sort of deters from what's actually happening. Like, I'll sort of be halfway through a page and I'll just realize I've been thinking about something else and sort of forget everything that I've just read.
I think a lot of people, I mean, especially these days, have that problem. And I think I'm guilty for like not reading anywhere. I mean, being like an English student, I read nowhere near as many books as I feel like I probably should.
Right.
I only really read the books that like are assigned to us that we have to read, which, you know, at the moment is quite a lot. And that's like that's all the reading that I need to do is like what I'm doing for uni. But outside of it, I've only really, maybe this year, gotten into the habit of just like always having a book on the go.
Sure.
And I don't know, I think it's worth going through a couple of bad books to eventually find one that's like, that really hits you.
Yeah.
And it's, you know, it's just finding it.
Yeah,
I guess.
I've given up on a lot of books. Like I'm usually the type of person, usually like if I start a movie, for example, once I get like 20 minutes in, whether it's good or bad, I have to finish that movie. Like, I just have to see how it plays out. Whereas with a book, I can easily just give up on it because I'm not in the middle of it, you know?
Right.
Like, it might just be a day where I want to go back to the book and I just think, no, that book hasn't been interesting me, so I'll stop and then, yeah. So the last few books that I've started, that's happened exactly that. I've gotten a couple of chapters in and been like,
right.
This is obviously not like exciting enough to me to keep reading this thing, but like I still want to be able to read, because I've had so many book recommendations in my life, and you hear about all these books that people are talking about and it's supposed to be really good, and I go, sweet, and I want to read them, but I don't want to have to pay for them, and it's just this weird vicious cycle. Like I think it's important, particularly for me, but I think in general for people to read, take away from like the screen and actually like for one, just take your eyes away from distractions,
Yeah.
like screens and things that are potentially damaging or are damaging to your eyes. But
that for me was a huge incentive to like read more.
Yeah.
Especially because this year, with so much of uni being on the screen, like, when we were at that full scale lockdown, like pretty much my entire life was like on my laptop.
Yeah.
Like I would go to lectures and it's on my laptop. I'd go to tutorials and it's on my laptop, and then I'd do the work and it's on my laptop, and that's like it's
a real shame, eh?
it's and that's what it is at the moment as well. But I think just to pull your eyes away from the lights and just read, it was I don't know, just
pretty beneficial.
Pretty
Yeah.
beneficial. And
That's a really sucky situation that you guys are in at uni at the moment. Because are you going to physical classes at the moment? Like, are you going into?
Nah, it's all-
you're still back to the screen stuff.
it's all online. Yeah.
It's a real shame because like part of the learning experience is being in a class and taking information directly from a person, in a classroom setting. It's a shame that,
Yeah.
it's a shame that cool that you are able to still continue your study from home. But like it comes a point, like if you're doing that for so long, it's like if the information is able to be given to me online, then what are you really paying for at that stage?
Yeah.
It's a shame to hear
Yeah.
that people are stuck at home doing that
And
sort of work.
it sucks for everyone. Like I feel for the lecturers as well, who aren't, they work really hard to get their like courses, to what they are, and they just don't have the opportunity to like present them in the way that they
Yeah.
would prefer. Most of my lectures, English is a very sort of, there's a lot of questions being asked, like hands raised, what do you think about this? And like, there's a lot of that. And now it's
Opinion based sort of learning. Yeah.
Yeah. And there's just none of that at
Yeah.
the moment. It's all just like pre-recorded lectures, like, reading notes. And
So you haven't even had like a Zoom call or anything?
oh no, we do. I've got one class that's on Zoom. And those are okay. They're not terrible, but
It's not the same.
it's still not the same.
Yeah.
I did a script writing class last semester, and towards sort of the end of the semester, we'd have a script, of like a short play. It'd be like sort of 30 pages long, I think, and everyone had a turn to like get their script read by other people. So like you pick, I want
Sure.
you to be this person and you to be this character.
Yep.
And everyone had to do it on Zoom. And I think something like that was, pretty, it definitely wasn't what it could have been.
Yeah.
In
There's
the
no
room.
real intimacy with the two people not there reading to each other. You want that whole experience of them being, in the moment, in the scene, whereas it completely takes away from that not being
Yeah.
close to each other.
Yeah, it was a real shame.
Yeah.
And I mean, something of that sort of length, like you work really hard on, and I don't know, just like I remember just like sitting there reading my script and like having two people on the screen, like sort of going back and forth,
Right.
reading my script from their screen, and it was just like, I don't know.
Yeah, that is a shame, man.
Not ideal.
That's unfortunate that you're in that situation. Hopefully it doesn't last too long. And I was curious to find out that is what is happening down here still, like in level 2. It's obviously just the gathering rule that limits you from going into class.
Yeah, it's a little bit frustrating because I mean, most of my classes are pretty small.
Right.
None are bigger than maybe sort of 20 people.
Right. So in your case, the rule doesn't apply, but generally speaking, on campus you can't have that many
it's just
people.
sort of a
That
blanket
sucks.
rule that goes
Yeah.
over the whole thing. I mean, I try not to complain because I know that we have it like so much better than a lot of places.
For sure. Yeah.
But it, I don't know, when you're paying for it, it's like it's definitely not what it could be.
Yeah.
But it's the work is the same.
Yeah, it's. I feel the exact same way, man, about not wanting to complain because yes, we're definitely lucky in the global scales of things, like where we are and how we've dealt with it and sort of where we're at and where we're going with it. But it's still a personal loss, I suppose. It's still something that has affected your way of learning or living. You still have a right to complain about that sort of thing, but it's no one's fault.
Yeah.
And it's just we have to, I guess, be thankful for where we are, because people in America have been in this situation non-stop since it started. It's easy to complain because any sudden change in your life like that, or when you're told to not go places, you feel like you're in a terrible scenario. But it's easy to have that initial insider's perspective, but you gotta look at what it is that you've got and how you can make the most of that. And I think a lot of people struggling with dealing with that fact, like that they are so limited to what they can do now. I really feel for people that are in situations where they're not able to feel, like in your case, you can't actually go into study and do what you're supposed to be doing. But yeah, we are super lucky as well. So you got to kind of weigh up the two. It's quite an awkward spot to be in.
Yeah, it's weird. I remember like in the first lockdown, I had to keep sort of reminding myself that every problem that I'm facing is pretty much in my own head. Like it's just like motivation issues and like just wanting to like go onto my computer and like do the work. And so it was just trying to remind myself, like you say, that it definitely could be worse.
Yeah. How did you end up using that time in the first lockdown or the lockdown?
I don't know. There was a lot of music making, and that was kind of like one of the major goals. I bought some like better microphones, and I thought, I'll set these up over the drums, and I wanted to use the time to to actually watch some videos and like try and learn how to record myself, because I just spent my whole life just trying to figure things out. Like I never really liked watching like instructional videos. Like I always just I bought the stuff and then I just played with it and I just figure it out.
Yeah.
And so I thought it's been the time, actually how should I do this? Where
what
should
is
I?
the correct approach, or the intended approach for this equipment? Yeah.
Yeah. So there was a bit of that, and the first 2 weeks were pretty good in terms of like music making and songwriting and stuff. But I mean, after that, and I've talked to like a lot of people about it, and I think people have sort of agreed that like after maybe 2 or 3 weeks, everyone just hit like a sort of a mental wall.
Yeah, definitely.
And,
yeah, it's initially nice to sort of get the time off, I suppose, but it's really time off on your time off. Not necessarily it's not like we were on holiday or anything, it's time away from work, but you're still super limited, and you sort of end up getting in your head quite a lot. So it sort of picks out the weak from the strong, I suppose, in that regard. Like I don't have any complaints from lockdown. I was in a fairly good situation and was able to sort of start doing things that I had always said that I would do, and things that I still could do in a lockdown situation, which was really great. But it goes back to the point, I don't want to gloat about having such a good time in lockdown, because it's not the same for everyone, and I understand that. But it was definitely a time for me to get away from a job that I'm not super happy about, and just really figure out how creative things are going to work for me in a capacity where I do have a whole day, a whole week to do it, figure out what's going to work in your way. It's just such an interesting time. I don't think we'll ever experience anything like that again, unless, it sort of comes back around and we literally have to do it again. But it's really a once in a lifetime experience to be locked inside your house for a month,
Yeah, it's bizarre, right?
Yeah,
it's like
really odd.
Generation defining event.
100%.
I just kept sort of reminding myself that even, I don't know, man, just there's been a lot of moments like that this year. I remember being at Eureka, the bar just down from uni, when the prime minister was doing her, I think it was the initial, what was going to happen with the initial cluster, the cluster that's just happened. Sorry, and we were all there, kind of ready for, we're just going to have dinner and have some beers and stuff. And there's a lot of people outside, and then the bar manager put the TV on, and everyone just went silent. And it was like a Friday night, at this bar, and everyone was just dead silent. And I thought, man, there are very few things that could get this kind of place
Yeah.
and these kind of people to
Crazy,
be completely
eh?
quiet.
Yeah.
And we were all just sitting there watching the Prime Minister talk, and I kind of just had like that snapshot moment where I thought like, this is pretty weird.
Yeah, taking yourself out of that moment and actually looking at it for what it is.
Yeah.
Yeah, that is really bizarre. It's not often that this is like history in the making, you know. This is the type of news that everyone knows about, and that's just, of course everyone's going to drop everything they're doing to find out whether they're going to be locked down again, you know. It is
Yeah.
such a weird thing.
I was talking to Utah just the other day, and we were both sort of saying it's weird to have like the whole world talking about the same thing.
Sure.
Like, I mean, before this, it was, I don't know, something like Trump, where it's like most people are talking about
Yeah.
it, but you know, it's been going on for a while. Like, you can sort of, you know,
It's
you
not
know,
really affecting anyone personally outside that country.
yeah. But at the moment, it's like everyone is talking about the same thing. Everyone, you know, and it's never made it's made the world seem pretty small, really, because we're all facing the same problem.
Yeah.
And you know, these faraway places have never really seemed closer.
Yeah,
I guess.
that's so true. Yeah, you're finding out so many things about how it's affecting people in different places, and yeah, it is weird to think like one of the things that sort of has made it. Not that I haven't thought it's real, or you know, I have initially when sort of it had first arrived in this country, I was freaking out like because it's you don't know what it is, you don't know what it's capable of doing. It was such early days. So naturally you sort of freak out, but now you sort of figure out more about it, and I guess you just sort of come to terms with it, and you calm down a bit. But one of the weird things is we didn't really take the mask approach straight off the bat.
Yeah.
Like there was a lot of skepticism around whether a mask was the thing to wear or not. So I initially had this impression of like, I don't think that's probably the way to really solve this thing. I thought, you know, either way it's probably going to get to you. And then seeing this time around, the general consensus seems to be, you know, wear a mask. Public transport, you got to wear a mask. And seeing people like come into work and seeing people through town, way more masks on people, that was really like, well, this just feels like America now, because you've been watching all those cities, and like when it first came out in China, everyone was wearing masks, and that's just like a foreign thing, you know, or was a foreign thing at the time. And then you see stories where it got really bad in Italy and everyone's wearing masks there as well, and it wasn't something we picked up on at that time. So seeing everyone start to wear masks makes it feel more worldwide, and like you say, smaller, because it's like, okay, we're in the same situation as those guys,
just
not
like
completely, but it's that dynamic of it.
Yeah, it's a constant reminder of what's going on.
Definitely.
Seeing all the masks around. I don't know. It's cool to see everyone just sort of, I mean, most people just on the same page. Like, if you know the consensus is that we wear masks now, like people are like,
Just
okay,
do it, man. Yeah,
okay, cool.
that's it. Yeah, it's so interesting watching people. You know, I've seen a lot of people that wear masks. Like, I haven't been wearing a mask since it's ramped up here again, and I fully respect the people that do, and I'm not against it. I have masks and definitely will wear one if I think I need to. But it's interesting seeing people that wear masks. Obviously, if you are someone that chooses to wear a mask at this time, at least in this end of the country, you think that you're obviously aware of what's going on and you're taking a precautionary measure to protect yourself from this thing. But these same people are people that are like not keeping 2 meters from people that are getting like super close to you and sort of not following the other general rules of COVID. I feel like some people put on a mask and think they're invincible and can just sort of do whatever again.
Right.
You sort of think that they would be the people that are more attuned to not the rules, but you know, I suppose they are rules at the moment.
Kind of rules,
yeah. And it's kind of like, well, you think you'd be keeping your distance and that sort of thing as well. Whereas me, like, I'm not wearing a mask, but I'm definitely aware of like keeping my distance from people, because like that's just one of the other things to follow. It's just weird, like how some people are perceiving the way in which to deal with it or what they're supposed to be doing. It's just interesting people watching times, I suppose.
Yeah, and I mean, I suppose being down this side of the country as well, it's kind of a weird dynamic, because it's not, you know, it's not here, or at least we don't think it's here.
Yeah.
but we sort of, you know, we're in the same country, and like Auckland is going through, or has gone through like a harder time than we have. Like they've been stricter and like, you know, tighter rules, and that's sort of like, you know, we have to follow the same rules, but like people are kind of a little bit looser about it because it's like, well, it's only in Auckland. Like,
yeah, there's definitely a type down here, and yeah, it's weird. It's weird. I've had a lot of that experience firsthand. People being arrogant towards it, and you think, oh, there's sort of a fear of, I guess, Aucklanders now. Like if any Aucklanders are coming down there, you know, it's like, oh, you know, I've had a few people that I've heard sort of say like, you know, oh, those rules only apply to Aucklanders, sort of thing, and it's like, you know, I'm the same. Like I believe that, you know, it's not down here, but you can't fully ignore it. You know, you still have to follow the rules that are being told that you're supposed to abide to. Oh man, I just have a lot of thoughts on this, but the general thought I'm trying to think is like trying to say is that, yeah, it's. I've completely lost my train of thought, man. We get too deep in this COVID stuff, and I just go crazy.
Yeah, I imagine it's come up probably a few times in the podcast.
Oh yeah, that's the main. I mean,
it's hard not to talk about though, because it's like,
well, like you say, it's
everything.
It's a worldwide thing. The world feels so small at the moment. It's kind of like this is just where we end up going, and it's obviously affecting our lives, you know, on a daily basis. It's sort of just it is what's there to talk about, you know. But it's just the arrogance that bugs me. Like this might, you know, sort of make me hypocrite if I'm not like a mask wearer, but there's a lot of arrogance around it, you know. Like I heard someone say something recently just in public that sort of bugged me. It was like I've been doing the tracing app and that sort of thing, and signing in and sanitizing when I go into store, not because I think I need to, but because it sort of just gives yourself, the store owner and the other customers in the store, reassurance. That's really all I'm doing it for. I'm not doing it for myself. I'm doing it because that's what has to be done, you know. And there's a lot of people that aren't doing it. It's weird to watch people just walk into stores and not do anything, and it's sort of like, are you doing that because you don't think it's here, or you're choosing not to do it for whatever reason? It's just weird. Some people just have ideas of their own about how this thing is working, you know, and choose to sort of ignore things. There's a point at which you're sort of, just sort of putting other people in a worrying mode, I suppose, and that's the approach to it that I'm taking. Like I don't really think that we're in a lot of danger in this city at the moment, but it's still in the country. Yeah. So you have to at least be aware of what you need to be doing, and it's just about like keeping others safe. Like that's more important to me than like my own safety. You don't want to be like going around. I'm getting off track here, but that you just have to think of others, and I think that's the main thing that I've been trying to do. Is just I'm aware that I'm going into a store, whether I think it's rampant or not, or whether I think I should be doing this or not. This is like, it's just peace of mind for everyone else that's around you, you know. Yeah,
it's just it's respect in a way.
Yeah,
like,
absolutely.
Like you say, I mean, I feel for the store owners because like they've, you know, times have never really been harder for them, and like as soon as they can open up again, it's like, you know, they have to follow these rules. Like, you know, you have to have sanitizer available, and you have to have the tracing thing, and like that's it. And then your store can open again. And so for people to just kind of walk through and not do any of that, it's just kind of like, you know,
it's tricky, and it's weird because that alone isn't really doing much. Like the scanning thing it's not necessarily protecting you. It's just a way of you being able to be contacted or notified that you've been somewhere where the virus may have been, or someone that had it has potentially been into. So you're not necessarily doing anything to protect the store. You're just sort of helping figure out where it is, which I'm all for, and that totally makes sense. But, you know, it does feel weird sometimes walking into stores with it going on. Sometimes I do wonder, like, again, it's slightly different this time around because it's only really in Auckland. But when it was everywhere else, it was like, I don't even want to go into stores at the moment, whether I can or not. I feel so weird and not that I think I've been in contact with anyone, but just so, it feels so weird walking into a store and only really like sanitizing your hands.
Yeah.
It's just a bizarre thing. Like, and I think that's why masks are just becoming more popular, because that's really sort of stopping any sort of spread that make a lot, the realistic way that you're sort of stopping the spread rather than just like letting the government know where you are, which is basically what we're doing at the moment, which is a strange concept in its own as well.
Are you the sort of person that like, do you go to the supermarket every day type person, or are you like big shop once a week?
That's very interesting that you asked me that. So over the lockdown, that 4-week period, I went twice, and those two shops were big shops.
Wow.
And the reason being there is that I didn't want to go to the supermarket that often, because that was sort of the hubs, I suppose, or like if you were to get it, it was likely to be from that place because that's the only place that people are really going at the moment. So my theory was, well, I'll just do a massive shop, and that means I don't have to go back that often. But typically, like all the COVID stuff aside, typically I'm going to the super maybe twice a week. I'll typically do a larger shop and then sort of like, I guess, top-ups throughout the week. And I was saying funny that because last week I think I went to the supermarket like 5 days in a row sort of thing, just because there was stuff I'd forgotten. But yeah, why do you ask?
Well, I don't know. It's just interesting, like, especially because, like you say, it's like sort of a hub. Everyone's, it's, especially during the bigger lockdown, it was the only place that there would be like a lot of people in a small space. And I was lucky that, I was with my parents, so I didn't have to go at all, pretty much.
Right.
But I can't imagine how I would have done if I was down here, because I'm pretty bad for going like almost every day. Like I'm really bad at planning.
Meal prep is hard, man.
Yeah, I don't know what I want for dinner next Wednesday. Like I've got no idea.
No, it actually is quite hard, and that's times that I find that I'm going there often, is that like I think I've sort of got ingredients to last me like a week's worth of meals, but you end up sort of only getting the one major meal that you had in your head at the time, and then everything else is sort of just staples, but you need so many other things to create meals out of that. It's really actually quite a hard thing to do, and I sort of understand why people that perhaps struggle with diet, like having a healthy diet, are like that, because it is actually really hard to buy a week's worth of groceries. Like if you don't really know how to put a meal together or what sort of makes like a solid meal, it's really hard to actually go, okay, well, I'm going to get this packet of rice and this is going to last me for this meal and I'll get through to this date. Like it just doesn't really work that way. Like I've sort of figured out a routine with shopping where I'm pretty much having the same meal every night, but there's just little bits different in it each time. Like I'm basically just buying like my carbs, so like my rice and potatoes and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
And it's usually like minute rice that I can heat up super quick, or just like boiled potatoes. And then I'm basically buying frozen veggies. I don't buy a lot of fresh veggies. I should. And I definitely still do like tomatoes and carrots and that sort of thing. I usually buy that fresh, but mainly what I'm eating vegetable wise are frozen veggies. So I just buy those in bulk.
Yeah.
And that pack will last me ages. So all I'm really doing is just cooking. Oh, and obviously the meat portion in my case.
Right.
Is usually just sausages or mince or something, and I can stretch those out, and basically all I have to do, like if I don't know what I'm going to have that night, I know I've got those things there to feed me each time. So like the meals aren't super interesting, but I can get them done quickly and I don't have to think too much, so that sort of helps me condense my shopping.
Yeah, you come home and there's enough there.
Yeah, to piece something together.
Yeah, to figure it out.
But it is a really hard thing to do, man, and hard to do it well if you're really concerned about hitting all those key parts of like what makes a meal, I suppose.
Yeah.
But yeah, I know people that buy takeaways all the time, and I sort of look at them and like, come on, you can cook a couple more meals here and there, but it is really hard. Supermarket shopping is hard.
And it's like, especially when you only know how to make a certain amount of things.
Yeah.
I don't know, like you wonder how, like there has to be a time where like you have to go out and like want to learn how to make something, or like you'll get your mum or your dad to teach you, like you go and ask them like, how can you teach me how to make some dinners, like so I can, like expand what I'm eating.
Yeah, exactly. I just think a lot of people don't want to take the time to really like, take an hour and a half to cook dinner, because that can be pretty time consuming, obviously, and like not a lot of people want to put the effort in to make meals like that all the time. So
It's
that's
like-
put people off.
It's like I don't know, learning a new card game or something.
Yeah.
People are like never receptive to wanting to learn a
Yeah.
new card game. They're
Yeah.
like, nah, man, we'll just play. I don't know,
K's and A's.
K's and A's,
Yeah.
exactly. But once you do learn it, you take maybe half an hour
Yeah.
to figure it out. Then that's with you, forever if you
Yeah.
can remember it.
Yeah.
And I think it's probably the same with like learning how to cook something
Yeah,
good.
exactly. And like most people eat every day. The typical human being eats every day. You
Yeah.
need to know how to put meals together, and that's a super important tool to have, is to be able to cook meals. And like, I've got a pretty solid foundation cooking wise, and like, I think I'm more in tune with like what I know or think I need from a meal rather than what actually makes the meal. So I'm usually like, all right, well, I have this, but then I need this to make it like a meal, And so, like, back to my point, I've got my carbs and I've got
Yeah.
veggies and I've got my protein. So that's typically all I'm really thinking of these days when I'm putting a meal together. But yeah, I can understand why people don't want to take ages to cook a meal, and like, it's so easy to get some things wrong as well.
Yeah.
But yeah, presumably there's going to be a point in everyone's life where, most people like to eat good food. At some point you're going to want to make good food, and that itself, you reap the benefits from it straight away. If you make a good meal and that's exciting to you and it tastes good, and the process was like easier than you thought, then that should be inspiration for you to continue cooking, and
Yeah.
you've got to be able to feed yourself at some point. Like if you're not, as soon as you stop living with your parents when you're young, you got to learn how to start cooking meals for yourself. It's so important. You almost have to,
Yeah, definitely. It's interesting how I feel like almost every story I've heard about like flats cooking together, like, organizing, like, I'll cook this week, you cook, or you cook tomorrow night, but like they have a schedule. I feel like every story I've heard of that, it's always fallen apart.
Yeah.
And it's ended up leaving, the people that know how to cook, like cooking for themselves, and the people that don't know how to cook,
Yeah.
having to kind of figure it out and go, well, no one's cooking for me.
Yeah.
I've got to go and learn. I've got to go figure it out. And they, usually don't, like you say, end up getting takeaways
Yeah.
or something.
And the problem in like flatting situations a lot of the time is that no one does dishes. So it gets to a point where like it's someone's night to cook, but they don't want to cook because the kitchen's like a mess, And I think typical student culture, like, or people, flatting culture rather, people are just lazy anyway. So like plans like that only do work for so long because it's like, not everyone's schedule is the same. Not everyone's at home at the same time. It's hard to
Yeah.
keep those things up. It does get a bit tricky.
Yeah. I think we were pretty, when we first moved down here, there was only the three of us, like me, Utah, and Theo. And I think 3 people is definitely a lot. Cooking for 3 people is like not, I don't think it's anywhere near as hard as cooking for 4 or 5 people.
Sure.
And so I think we managed to keep that up for pretty much the whole year that we were down there. And having Utah as well, who's worked for his dad's restaurant in Queenstown.
Oh,
Like
okay.
he's
Yeah.
he's a chef. He's a sushi chef.
Right.
And so like just learning from him, like having him teach me how to cook a good stir fry,
Fuck yeah. I love
stuff like that.
I love sushi.
Pulled pork even.
Fuck yeah.
It was good.
Fantastic.
We had a party though where the pulled pork got stolen.
What?
We cooked like I don't know, like we spent like quite a lot of money on like a lot of pork, and we like, we had it all in this bowl, and we had like our portion, and we put it in the fridge, and we had a party. You might even have been there. It was one of those gigs that we had downstairs.
Sure.
Back at the London Street flat.
Yeah.
And the party went on, and then everyone left, and we went into the fridge, and someone ate all the
Shit.
pulled pork, man.
Bastards, man. I've heard so many stories about that, having massive parties at flats, and then there's just items
food's-
gone from the fridge the next day.
The food's gone.
What a shame.
Yeah.
Sounds good.
I don't think anyone would want to steal what's in our fridge at the moment, though.
No.
It's just like,
Bit of a sty.
well, it's not a style. It's just like it's not food, It's
Right.
like, I don't know who wants to eat like, margarine.
Right, so it's empty.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Stuff like that.
Oh, funny. Should we have a quick breather? Phones, man.
Yeah. I just got a new one, and I spent way too much time on it.
What is it?
It's one of those Oppos,
Oh, true.
but it's like, I don't know. It's like just as good as pretty much anything.
Fucking big phone, man.
Yeah, it's big. and it was cheap. Bro.
What did you have before that?
I had like an iPhone. Oh no, it was the Samsung 7, I think.
Samsung 7.
Yeah, I don't know, it was pretty shitty.
I can't get on board with these big phones, eh? Like that's
oh,
me.
true. That's a nice size,
Yeah,
actually.
I think it's a iPhone SE. I think it's a 5 SE because that's the iPhone 5 body
Yeah.
with like an iPhone 6 in it or something like that. But like that form factor is just perfect. Like
That's what a phone should be.
fit it all in my hand.
Yeah.
Like it's not super obtrusive, but it's funny. Like I think I spoke about this in one of the earlier podcasts, but like I follow the tech world heavily. Like I'm on YouTube watching tech
Right.
reviewers and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
Super heavy involved in like what the new phones are and what they do and what they're capable of. But yeah, you don't realize how big they actually are until you see them in person. And it wasn't until like I went into Spark or whatever and I was like, oh, the new Samsung such and such, and picked it up. I was like, Jesus Christ. It's crazy. Like
it's a pain. Like when I'm walking and I want to reach like an app that's like in the top corner, I honestly can't even.
Can't do it.
I can't even read
Yeah.
it. Like I used to. I don't know. For ages, my music app was like way up there, and I'd
Yeah.
be like fucking doing this.
Have to two-hand it.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's crazy. I like the big display, but like I don't really watch like anything on my phone, so I don't really need something that big.
Oh, that's what your laptop's for,
But
right?
you know, the way that tech is evolving, I'm inevitably going to have to upgrade at some point, and it's probably going to be a much bigger phone than this one is, unfortunately, unless
Yeah.
I just keep buying like second hand. I mean, I don't love this phone. Like at the time I bought it, it was perfect, but like tech just ramps up so quickly over time in such a short period of time these days as well, that
Yeah.
like the specs just get so outdated, like not even like a year later. And it's
sure.
like, I just, you know, and especially the storage thing, like it just gets to a point where content is so heavy these days, and like you just need so much storage. Like all these apps use up so much storage that you just need to have. So
Yeah.
like you just inevitably will have to upgrade your phone.
Yeah.
But
I mean, this was me just trying to keep up, I guess, in the most cost-efficient way possible. It's like
They're supposed to be pretty good. Those
It's like
offers.
$300. Super,
Really?
Yeah, really, really cheap.
What are you talking like storage wise and like
It's
camera wise?
It's 64, pretty sure. It's got 4 cameras.
Oh shit.
It's got like the whole finger touch.
Yeah, yeah,
thing.
that whole
But
jam.
bro, honestly, it's got everything
Yeah.
that your iPhones and all that would do.
Have you seen? Are you involved with the tech world at all?
Not really. Yeah,
This is the latest and greatest from Microsoft. I think they've only just released like a beta version of it, but it's what is it called? Surface Duo. So it's basically like, I wonder if there's like a thing here. That's it there.
Oh,
It's
like folds
basically
out.
like a
What?
folding tablet phone thing. And that's
What?
like that's the size of it. So like it's just
She
like
can't even hold it. It's like
yeah, it's a weirdly like taken photo, but
it's like resting. In
yeah,
it.
it folds right around, so you can actually
Ah.
use it like a phone. I wonder if there's a picture of it. It basically looks like that, but you know you can fold it the other way
Right.
around and it becomes a phone. But the weird thing, yeah, it doesn't seem like it's awesome. Like as
that's
far as
cool.
tech goes, like
Yeah.
it's a really cool thing, but it just doesn't seem super practical. Like can't really imagine a
that's just
scenario in which I
too
would
much
actually
phone.
use that. You know, yeah, it is too much phone. It's cool to see like how folding phones have like evolved and sort of where they've gotten to, but it's just not like, yeah, I don't know. It's sort of the novelty of it now, I suppose, and you sort of, I think technology has sort of reached a point where like the only new things that are coming out are sort of just like novelties, you know. Like what more do you really need from a smartphone that it can't really do? You
Yeah.
know, it's just like all that you're really adding to it is just basically excessive amounts of what you already have in terms of like storage and performance and display.
Yeah.
That all gets better and better, and that's like, well, great, but
Yeah.
you know, it's an improvements, but like you can't really,
In terms of function, it's like what else?
you
What else
can't
do you
go
want?
too much further, and that's when you end up with products like this. It's like, all right, how can we like create a flagship model that everyone's going to be talking about? Let's make a phone that's a tablet that folds in half, that, you know, and what will
Great.
happen from that is you'll just have new functionalities that come from that.
Yeah.
Things that we didn't even know like we needed. Like if this is sort of the future of devices, there'll be styles of workflow and like performance things and stuff that'll do that we didn't think that we needed until now, and that's what's been happening with smartphones anyway. But it's like, what do you really need like a device like that for? It just doesn't really achieve anything more aside from portability, I suppose. Like, I guess it's just a tablet that you can fit in your pocket. But I'm sort of like, if you think you need that, like surely a laptop, achieves the same sort of. I don't know. I think it's fascinating. Like, I love it. I think it's such a cool advancement. But it's just like
still waiting for the next thing that it's like you need to have this,
dude. And they're pretty sure they're fucking expensive too.
I imagine.
Price point. It'll be US, I'm sure, but like US 1400. That's
What's
okay.
that
I know
like?
that it's heavy too, because I think the US dollar's like one. Yeah, over $2,000 for this thing. That's just not worth it.
Laptop.
Exactly. Yeah. Just get a tablet.
A good laptop as well.
Yeah,
for
I
that.
don't know. I think it's kind of like a flex in a way. You just want to have that thing to say that you have that thing.
I'd be more inclined to get one of the new watches or something.
Yeah, for sure.
I think that's a
bit more practicality
yeah,
involved with it. Yeah, for sure.
I think that's a better innovation.
Yeah,
Like,
and that has more like real life uses as well, like in terms of fitness and things as well.
Yeah,
The things that you
for
can
sure.
do and monitor, that makes sense. But this Duo device is just like, it's just the cool thing, And as soon as I think it was Samsung that made the first folding device, that's just seems to be the theme of where tech is at. So other companies just want to hop on and be like, right, well, we can do that and we can do it this way, and it's just the marketing of it all, and being the latest and greatest just gets a bit intense. I discovered the other day a bath salts CD in my car.
No
from
way.
like a couple of years ago. It was pretty crazy.
Good
I
grief.
I don't know what it was actually called. It might have been a self-titled thing. I think it's just got like 4 tracks on it. But I was like, wow, that's some vintage stuff. Like, you guys have come a long way since bath salts.
Yeah, we don't really like to think about that early
Right.
stuff. Well, that first EP is like, I don't know. The problem with it is it captured us like learning how to like play our instruments and like how to,
So it's that early. Like,
Yeah, it's pretty-
that's your first group. Is the 3 of you?
Yeah. The backstory of that is like the band started by us all playing the wrong instruments.
Right.
So Theo wasn't a drummer; he was a guitar player, but he was just playing drums.
Right.
Yuta was a guitar player; he's playing bass. I've never sung before. I'm gonna sing. Like,
Whoa.
it was just kind of like this because we had other bands. We were at the high school.
Okay.
We had
Yep.
doing other things, and it was kind of like a joke.
Yeah.
Like in the start, we were only writing songs about like aquatic themed songs. Like that was the whole joke. I don't know. We wrote like songs about fish and about the ocean and shit. And it was just stupid. But because we're just such close friends, like that just kept on going, and then eventually it's like start to take it a little bit more seriously. And so looking back at that first EP, it's kind of like it was part joke and part like us just like not really knowing what we're supposed to sound like.
Sure.
What are we doing?
Finding your feet.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and for some reason it ended up being like really psychedelic, and I'm like, I don't even really like psychedelic music that
Right.
much. Well, I mean, I don't know. I like Pink Floyd as much as the next guy, but
Sure.
like that's not
What you want to
that's not my thing.
Yeah.
And so I don't know.
Interesting.
It's
I wonder
just-
if it was just sort of like where music was at the time, that you sort of just had like a random influence happening, because that just was something that
I
was
think
happening.
it was it was the jangly guitar, like chorus pedal.
Because what year would this have been when you were in the core of like bath salts, or when that sort of started?
When it started was the last year of high school, so it would have been 2016, I think it was.
Okay.
When we did that, and it was cool. Like we had, there was this guy Paul who came into school to teach like sound tech. He was like a sort of a part-time teacher there.
Yeah.
And he offered to like we were like a band, and he offered to record us, and I think to sort of help his practice and also help us. And that was like, we're very, very grateful.
Sure.
But it's just the problem was that we were just like, we was not
really there
not
yet.
ready.
Yeah.
We were just starting out. And I mean, I don't know.
But I suppose like in that scenario, in hindsight, it's like someone was there available to help you and wanting to help you because probably saw something within you guys that was worthwhile,
I wouldn't change a thing.
Yeah.
I wouldn't change a thing. And that's part of the reason why we wanted to change the name, is because I wanted to keep bar salts like alive in a sense, and just sort of like package it up, and just sort of put it aside, and like it's there, it's on the internet, you can find it if you want. But that's we're finally like we know what we're doing a bit more now, and this is what we are now.
Right.
And that was part of the incentive to do that, as well as the name bar salts being like problematic and
Yeah, sure. It's got some negative connotations
in
there.
so many ways.
So what stemmed the name 3/4 Marathon?
Partly, I don't know, if I gave it a reason, it would be like in the sort of genre of music that we play, there are a lot of like sport themed names. It's hard to explain, but like in this sort of brand of like emo that we play, there's a band like American football, modern baseball, like these.
Sure.
I don't know. It's just a sort of a weird theme of that genre of music. That's like part of the incentive was to follow that, but it was mainly just like, I think me and Theo were just talking, and we just like accidentally said the words 3/4 Marathon, and I remember we kind of looked at each other and we were like, is that our new name? Is that it? And it was kind of like stupid at first, but the more we said it, we were like, no, it's actually, we quite like it. It's a pretty.
I presume that's how all band names come to play. Someone just says something random and you're like, oh.
That's quite nice, yeah.
And there's no reason for you to have a particular name either. Like I don't expect you to have a full reason behind it. Sometimes you just know that it's the right fit, or it just sounds, like
it was
fits
interesting though, like, because we knew that we wanted to change the name. So we were sort of, for about maybe 2 months or so, we were like very aware of like, okay, we're looking for a new name. And we brainstormed like, I had a list on my old phone and it was full of all sorts of crap.
Yeah.
But it was weird to like just know exactly when we hit the right one. Like we were sort of iffy on like, is this a good name? But it was weird to sort of like get to a point where like, that's the one.
Good. You got
We
that
found
gut
it.
feeling, because I hate picking names for things. Absolutely hate it. Like it'll take me so long. And I presume, for a band name, you're gonna sit on it for a while, or it's gonna take you a while to think of something, or for something to come organically. But just anything that I think of just instantly like bothers me, or like the problem I have creatively is like looking back on sort of things, like things don't have longevity with things that I make, or at least in my own mind. Like whatever I come up with eventually becomes like a bore to me at some stage.
Right.
It's hard to sort of get past that point of like actually having, like, I'd feel better about keeping a name for something if someone else had come up with it. Like I'd be more inspired by the idea that's presented to me than something that I came up with on my own, which is pretty problematic. But it's like, influence is everything creatively. You gotta pull something from somewhere. I shouldn't say you have to, because some people are amazingly creative like that. But, you're usually basing like a process, especially these days, like you're basing a creative process or whatever it is based on something that you sort of know to be like, you're thinking about the sports theme and that sort of thing. So it's sort of derived from that. But it's hard to come up with something like organic that's true to you and that you feel is fitting. It doesn't come that easily. It's not like you can just sit down and think up of something like that. It just comes to be just through someone randomly saying something.
And I definitely resonate with what you said about like ideas having like not having longevity. Like when you're on your own, it's hard to like convince yourself to like keep working at something when like nothing seems to be happening. And I think that's the good thing about being in a group or in a band or something, because like we're all in it together and like we're all working towards the same thing. And so like, if it doesn't have, I don't know. There's more incentive to like keep it going for that reason, especially because we're like such good mates.
Absolutely.
So yeah, I resonate with that for sure.
For sure. That's I think a lot of what makes a band work, and you guys just definitely have that whole thing of the friendship and the way that you guys work as a team. It's just obviously like pays off, you know, like it's working the way you want, and the ability to be able to present your ideas to close friends rather than band members, you know, is obviously a lot more.
I couldn't imagine being in a band with people that you like are not close friends with.
Crazy, I think that's one of the things that really makes or breaks a band, and I feel like a lot of the time people that are looking for band members, or you know, trying to start a band and sort of putting ads out for this player or that player, nothing wrong with that, but like creatively can sort of have a dampener, because like unless you have the ability or the, you know, the willpower to say, right, this is what we're doing, I need you to do this, this and this, that's all good and well, can come together really well and sound amazing if you've got, you know, talented musicians. But there's something about, you know, a group of friends making something that they're all on the same pathway towards, rather than people that are just all good at what they do. It's like sports teams, you know. I hate to translate it to this, but this is just another thing in that regard. You can't like sign the best players in a league to one team and expect that team to be the greatest team because you've got the greatest shooter, you've got I'm thinking basketball specifically, the greatest shooter, the greatest defensive player, whatever. Right. The greatest team is usually the team that have been together the longest and know each other and know how people work aside from how they actually perform, and have something that's more, I don't know, I feel like there's one word to cap it all off and I just can't think of what it is, you know. It is friendship, I think, you know, and just that tightness in the group that makes things work the way it does. Yeah,
and I think when you're around your friends, you like, I don't know, you want to do well for your friends. You want to impress them.
Yeah,
like
absolutely.
You want to, you know, you want to like show them what you can do and like kind of one up each other and like in this really healthy way. And I mean, bands are the same thing. Like every band that has had, we said, like we were talking about this before, every band that has had longevity have been like good friends, and that's where it's founded on.
Yes,
you know, sometimes not for the better. Like I'm thinking of Metallica, and I'm you know, Lars, the drummer Lars, like I can't stand him. Like he's shit, man. Like, I will say it, he's shit.
Yeah.
But they're obviously good mates, and they could never like just get some guy in that's like better. Yeah. You know, because they're just that tight. Yeah. Not musically, but
that's so interesting. Yeah, because like as good as that is, like the example I think of is the Red Hot Chili Peppers. I mentioned that before.
For sure, yeah.
Like the main duo in that team is Flea and Anthony. But like, you know, they'd gone through drummers and other guitarists, but they sort of ended up coming back to, what's his name?
Chad.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. But like, yeah, it's interesting because like you that can almost be a dampener in the whole idea of things. Like in that example of Metallica, like if the drum player is a good friend of theirs, but is not playing the music the way that it needs to or the way they want it to be, whoever is the you know the leader, I suppose, or who's mainly choreographing the routine, you know, does it ever get to a point where you sort of like, look, I know we're good buds, but like you're not getting it the way we want it, you know? That must be pretty upsetting for someone to be in that scenario, you know? Like, what do you just carry on and just be friends? Or
I'm sure it's happened before.
Because I guess in the example of Metallica, they're obviously a very successful band, and they can obviously play the drums to some extent, but like...
He's just, I mean, my thing with him is he's like the only drummer that I've ever seen that has gotten worse over time.
Right.
Like, you know, usually... Yeah, I don't know. Usually, if the more you play drums, the better you get, right? Yeah. Like, but he, you know, even in the sort of 90s and early 2000s, like he was just losing the plot, like musically, and it was just sort of, it was almost odd. It was like, why is this happening? Like, you're doing these massive tours, you're playing every night. Why are you?
Were they renowned to be like a band that experimented with drugs and that sort of thing?
I think so.
Could that have been something that affected, just got too heavy in the
I think so. There was a
dark
really
side of
interesting
the band.
documentary. I mean, I'm not the biggest Metallica fan ever, but there was a
Won't
really
hold you to it.
interesting documentary that came alongside this album that they did, which is like this album called Saint Anger, which is like notoriously like their worst album.
Right.
Like everyone sort of pretty much agrees that. And the documentary is almost better known because it showed them at kind of like them almost breaking point. Like they were really not, like their friendship was like definitely in jeopardy.
Right.
And it was really, I think drugs and alcohol might have had something to do with that. They weren't explicit about that, I don't think. But I think just the fact that they got through something as sort of intense as that is like testament to the strength of the actual, like the foundation of the friendship.
Right. Yeah.
And so, I mean, that's interesting to see. And it's, it's good that they're still mates, but it's like, I don't know. I watched some of the videos and I just think like,
Yeah.
this would be a really, really good band if they had a guy that could keep time.
That's so interesting.
It's a controversial topic.
I
but-
don't have like a keen ear when it comes to that sort of thing, and like I mentioned before, that genre of music. I'm speaking more like the band sense, not necessarily a genre, but like in a band scenario musically. It's interesting to see what makes or breaks bands in that predicament, and you would worry that if it got to a point where you thought that you needed to replace like a friend in the band, whether in doing that actually sort of puts a dampener on the whole dynamic. It's like, oh
imagine
well,
it
why
would,
did we
yeah.
get rid of our buddy? Why didn't we try to do something about it? And you'd hate to sort of succeed after the elimination of someone in that group as well. And that's I think one of the big things that the Chili Peppers went through is that they did have to say like, hey, look, I think Anthony even was at a point where he was so, deep into drug using that, those other guys were saying to him like you're not showing up to practices and
Yeah.
that sort of thing. Like we're gonna kick you. Well, I think he did actually get kicked out because of that, and it was like fuck. Like the Chili Peppers might not have even been the Chili Peppers if he hadn't gotten his act together, sort of thing. Which is such a weird thing, and weird how heavily like drugs are something that are like incorporated into the music industry or creative fields in general
Yeah.
to sort of like oftentimes like heighten the creative outlet to a point, and then becomes a point where it's almost like romanticized to be like
Yeah.
a druggy musician. It's a weird.
Yeah, it's the I don't know. It's the whole tortured artist thing. And
Yeah.
it's been around It's been around well before, like rock music. Like a lot of the there were a number of poets way back in the sort of early 1800s. That were, I mean, back then poets were basically like rock stars. Like they were, like the thing that everyone was talking about, and they were sort of loud-mouthed and
Yeah.
controversial
Yeah.
and whatever. And there were a lot of them that like had opium addictions, and like a lot of them that committed suicide and things like that. And I think that whole tortured artist has definitely carried on through to your Jim Morrisons and your Kurt
Yeah.
Cobains and this kind of thing.
Yeah.
And it's definitely still with us for sure.
Yeah. How do you feel that like, I personally believe that does make for good art, but do you think that is what defines like an artist, to have like a dark background or come from some sort of struggle, or, have some sort of wacky component to them?
Yeah, that's a really good question.
Yeah.
I don't think it's like, I don't think it defines, like, I don't think it's absolutely necessary. I don't think every great artist or like only great artists have like these dark pasts. But I don't know, there is like, you can't deny that there's definitely like this, it's almost like
Persona.
yeah, there's
guess.
definitely like this, almost like it's tradition that
Yeah, yeah.
these the best artists have like something in them that is like,
Because when I think about that, I think how I think of art. It's weird saying this, being an artist and a painter in particular, and saying this is that like I feel like what actually makes I don't know how to define art or an artist, but I feel like what defines good art usually is that, like someone who has come from something that has come from pain, or something that has sort of really affected them in a serious way, and the art has come from that. It's not just someone like, you know, starting something and just painting something out of thin air, but rather painting something for a reason,
Right.
so to speak, rather than just enjoyment. Like it's a way of sort of expressing that emotion, and therefore creates like a more meaningful piece of the art, which I struggle with a lot because I don't come from any dark place, or I don't have anything in my life to have any reason to feel negative towards. So I do have a hard time like looking at my own work and figuring out what it is, why it is the way it is, and why I make it the way that I make it. I don't think that I'm invalid in that sense, but I do definitely look at artists that are in that predicament and perceive their work a lot more intensely, and like there's always some story to art that I like that is usually in some sort of dark background, you know.
What? Yeah, definitely. Like, I don't know, when I like a certain a song or an album or something, I'm always trying to like figure out who the people are, where they come from, why it is the way it is. And it's not always from some sort of dark, horrible situation, but when it is, it definitely sort of draws you in a little bit more.
Yeah, definitely.
And
there's intrigue and there's a story to it, you know, rather than just something that's come from someone's mind out of the blue.
Yeah, and you want to I don't know, you want to believe that like they've just made like this massive leap, like they were in the darkest, the deepest depths, and they've gone forward and done something that like a lot of people won't ever do.
Yeah, it's like sort of what we were saying before on the break about, you know, being an outsider in the art realm. Like you asked if I liked that aspect of it, or is that something I sort of want to achieve, and that was a definite yes for me. Like there's definitely a part in being an outsider in any field to sort of have that, I guess, part of your persona, or like create some interesting attention towards yourself because of something that's way different. And it's I definitely like I'm drawn to that in other creatives, like aside from me alone. It's definitely like what I'm drawn to in the art world, whether it's art, music, or whatever. If it comes from like a hard place, it's usually a lot more enjoyable, ironically. You know, I definitely am more drawn to that aspect of art, and that's why I ask this question a lot and want to know other people's perspective on it, because it's such an interesting concept, and sort of makes me think like, well, what is art? What really makes good art? And you know, when does it stop being art and just becomes like, you know, I don't even have the word for what it wouldn't be.
Yeah, I mean, when you learn about, in my experience of like studying English and things, when you learn about like an author or a poet or a musician or something, that they're always beginning with a bit of biography, right? Like, who is this person? Like, you know, what did they go through? And it is often like, you know, pretty bleak. Like, you know, one of my favorite poets, this guy John Clare, was like, they called him the peasant poet because he was like he was so poor, but for whatever reason he just had like that thing that all of the richer poets had, and he just had that sort of like that dialect and that like way with words, even though he was terrible at spelling, and he was terrible at like, you know, he used words that like were just like, you know, not quite right, but like he had this way of like expressing that all the richer poets either had or even aspired to. And so like, I don't know, it makes these people, like, if I hadn't have known any of that, would I be drawn to his work? I honestly I can't say, because you know, it's because
that's a huge portion of it, is that alone, like regardless of the content. seeing what that person is like, or what they've been through, or what their current situation is, just immediately like changes your perspective on what the work is like. If you're definitely in that case where you've sort of read a biography beforehand and you've got an idea already, you're already drawn to that from that fact alone, before you even look at the work. But it's interesting, and a question I ask a lot, because when you look at like big artists, there's always like to bring up an example relative to what we've talked about, like Anthony Kiedis, like he's had a terrible like childhood, typical childhood, and gone through drug abuse and that sort of thing. And the band's been immensely successful, not because of that, but that's the whole story tied up with it that sort of makes for great art. And there's so many other artists in the same story, like like that example doesn't remind me of anyone specifically, but you've definitely heard that story in which someone has had some troubled part of their life, or had some abuse as a kid or something that has drawn out this sort of side of them to create like really serious art, so to speak.
And I guess that's probably why, I mean, I don't know if these shows are that popular anymore because of like streaming being so big, but you remember like your American Idols and your X Factors and that, and there's always that like the sob story, right? There's always at least a few per episode that come out with some real sad story, and it's like so it's almost like they're trying to. I mean, some of them I don't doubt were true, but it's almost like they're trying to create the tortured artist. And like I did hear rumors that it's like, if they would give you one or something like that. I don't know if it's true or not, but I find it quite believable. Being like,
they would give a story to a contestant.
I don't know if it's true, but that wouldn't surprise me. I tend to believe it just because of like the nature of that kind of show. I also,
alongside that, I also believe that as part of the American culture and like the American dream, people just have that stored up in them anyway. They're always pulling something from their life that they can use as a sob story to do that, or don't even need someone to tell them. They just know that a sob story is going to get them somewhere, so they make something up knowing full well they're going to be on a public stage, making some statement to get them further. And it's like, it gets to a point, especially with those shows where you have such a huge audience watching them of all different kinds of people, it sort of just becomes like, all right, well, you're obviously trying to do this or that, and people still sop it up. Like, people love that shit. People love hearing those stories, and I think that's why probably we're having this discussion, is that something that actually makes for good work? Because you can tell when someone has had a genuine experience like that, and that there is emotion coming through in that work, rather than someone who's just saying, I've had something bad happen to me, feel sorry for me, and might not perform that well, or they may well perform well, but it might not actually have come from that place that they've spoken about, which is really hard to interpret, but you just know when it is that thing for sure.
And it's interesting how I don't know, I feel like these, the people that have gone through this horrible thing in their childhood or whenever, I feel like from what I've seen, they don't usually talk about it explicitly in their work.
Right.
Like it's, I don't know, like the poet I was talking about before, he was strictly nature poet. He's only, he's looking at landscapes and trees and stuff, and he's just talking about how beautiful it all is.
Sure.
And that was what he did. And I'm thinking about Anthony Kiedis, and I know there's like scar tissue and things like that, but it doesn't seem like he was overly like, this is what I've been through, like, this is my life kind of thing. It's like,
I think he hates the fact that book is out there.
Oh, really?
Yeah, because I'd read a good chunk of the book, and then sort of wanted to see like how much of an online presence he had, or rather like how much he's actually spoken about this outside of the book, and had stumbled across a recent interview with him, I think over the last couple of years, where I think one of the questions it was a really like quirky style interview. It was kind of weird to watch, but one of the questions that he got asked was, it was something along the lines of like, how much do you want the people to know about you? Or, you know, like what? I don't actually know what the question was that he got asked, but his answer was basically like, there's a whole like biography about me. Like I hate that that's there. Like I hate that people. I wish that no one knew about my life, sort of thing. So
that's interesting because that really was a hit. That was a big book. I remember a lot of people talking about it when it came out. I haven't read it because, I mean, I don't know. I tend to gravitate towards like novels and stuff like that. Yeah, for sure. But I just remember being like a lot of people recommending that book to me, and it was sort of. And I guess it was because like the story was so out of the ordinary and like
it's dramatic. People love drama.
Very, very dramatic. Yeah, that's really interesting that he doesn't want it out there.
Yeah, that's kind of why I stopped reading it. Yeah, because it was like, okay, well, if I'm finding out this really personal information about this guy, and he himself doesn't even like the fact that it's out there and people are reading it, why should I finish it? I'm not going to go, oh, you know, well, I've got the information here. I've got that against you now. I'm just like, no.
Well, Flea just put one out as well.
I actually really want to read that. I mean, like, it's probably going to be the same story, but like the fact that is more recent, and knowing Flea, his personality against Anthony Kiedis, I think that is more just like, I'm sure there was a conversation that was had between the two before Flea had put that book out as well, where Anthony's like, look, this is how I feel about my one. Like, are you sure you want to do this? And I'm sure it's out for a reason, so I don't think I would have too much problem reading that.
He's always had a slightly louder presence in media, so it doesn't surprise me that he's done that. But I don't know. Yeah, just contrasting to, you know, his good mate Anthony. Like, I don't know. I just think that's quite interesting.
Yeah, he has that as an audiobook as well, Flea ones.
Oh. So him reading it?
Yeah. The fact that he's read the whole novel, like willingly, like being recorded, I think he's probably pretty okay with people reading the book. But yeah, I'm not sure. I mean, there's going to be obviously a lot more insight into his life, but I think I've sort of, from Anthony's book, got a good general idea about their dynamic and like their friendship from Anthony's book. So I'm very interested to read it to see, I guess, a different perspective on the whole story, and you might even end up getting sort of the same stories from a different narrative, which would be really interesting to read. But I think I've gotten a good grasp on what the Chili Peppers band is like. Like, I'm not really itching to read that, but that is definitely on the top of my list. And interesting that you say you. I understand. You know, you like novels more than
yeah, generally.
I always get them mixed up. Fiction and non-fiction.
Novel fiction.
Yeah, so what's the real?
Non-fiction.
Non-fiction, okay.
Yeah,
so I'm much more drawn to non-fiction style books than fiction. And I think because, like, I'm definitely the type to judge a book by its cover.
Right.
It definitely has some negative connotations, of course. But I'm much more willing to read about something. In the case of the Anthony book, I was like, well, I know Anthony. I like his music. I know a wee bit about his background. I want to find out more, rather than going into some random story that I'm really just really judging the premise of the book based on the you know, description of it from the back. So I'm like, no, that doesn't sound like it's for me. Right, going through that rather than actually diving into something and sort of realizing why it might be good, because you don't know until you start reading. You know?
Yeah. Well, I mean, like I was saying before, like there's certain things about the novel that just, honestly, whether it's good or bad, I'm usually just impressed that like someone has managed to like craft the story,
condense their life into a book
in like 80,000 words, you know, and it's just like, I find that pretty amazing. So even when I read books that I don't like, I'm always at least a little bit impressed.
Sure.
Which is, you know, which helps. But I don't know, these days when I have the time, you know, when I have the time to go and like pick out a book for myself and like read it, not because someone's told me to, but because I want to, I usually go for like books that have like won prizes or something like something like that, like
something you know that has been
And so I was I've just before the first lockdown, I felt I was doing exactly that, and I was just in the bookshop, the uni bookshop, And I just picked one off the shelf, and it was like, yeah, it's it's like I don't know, the book of the year in some country or something like that.
But the thing is, man, they're all the book of the year. That's what I can't
No,
do.
that's the whole bestseller thing. And the bestseller word is like, I honestly, that doesn't mean, I feel like that
Right.
doesn't mean anything. It's when you've got like the sticker that it's like, this won this prize. And it's a prize that like I think it's the Pulitzer Prize.
Okay.
Might be pronounced that way. And it's got like this golden sticker, and it's like, that's what you
Yeah,
want,
for sure.
It's almost
Okay.
like a,
So there is definitely a telltale sign.
yeah, or
Okay.
there's like a Nobel Prize, like
Sure.
something like that. So you pick those out, and I mean they're usually pretty good.
Yeah.
Right? Bestseller thing, like I wouldn't fall for that though, because every book is a bestseller.
Yeah.
in the publisher's eyes, right?
Well, I've always that's it, eh? And it's probably like that line itself has probably so many like meanings behind it. It might sound like it's been the best selling book in the world, but it might just be that publisher's like bestseller for that month or something.
Yeah.
But I think in that regard, and a lot of other things, you can actually like pay to get like that put on things, so it looks like it's actually that. But I noticed that where like all the books I had like #1 bestseller,
Yeah.
and there's always random comments on the back, and it's like, how many bestsellers can there be in the world?
It's- well, honestly, you go into a bookshop and pretty much every book has like this praise on the back, from like, I don't know, The Guardian or something.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
it's like, where does this all come from?
Just a newspaper or something.
One thing that really puts me off, I don't really buy like CDs or vinyl anywhere near as much as I used to anymore. But one thing that would really put me off buying anything would be finding a sticker on the front of it that said like, if you like this band, you'll like this.
Mm.
And I'd come across that every now and then, and that really put me off, because it was like, this band is like really narrowing what I should expect of them.
Right.
And and then a couple of times I bought it, and it would sound like exactly like that band, except just without all of the character, without all the originality. It was just like carbon copy. But I don't know. It's
I've never seen that before.
I don't know. I bring it up because it's like just kind of like trying to find that selling point of
Sure.
something.
So would
and
it have been like the label like pushing another artist or something?
I guess so, something like that. Yeah.
Like a sticker that's been put onto it, or
it's on the CD. Yeah.
Right.
Well, on the cover, and it's like, be like something like for fans of, the one I got was for fans of Refused, who's like this well-renowned Swedish punk band, like one of my favorite bands. And I saw this sticker and it said for fans of Refused, and I'm thinking, I'm a fan of Refused, like, should I buy this?
Immediately.
And I did, and it sounded exactly the same as Refused, and
Oh.
it was in the worst way possible though. Like it was
Right.
a carbon copy, and it was just like, I don't know, it's seeing something like that, like really just selling yourself to like on the basis of like other bands, other people's achievements.
Right.
It's like, do you know what I mean? Like it's,
You mean in the perspective of the artist that has been recommended, not the actual artist?
yeah. Well, so like what's being sold, and this band being like, we want to be this band,
Right.
so you should listen to us because we sound like them.
Right.
So,
Yes.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. That makes no sense, really. Yeah.
It's
I mean, I'm all for getting recommended similar artists, but like in that case, getting like pretty much the same content from a different place, it's like, well,
yeah.
I've already got that, That's so interesting. I wonder if that's who's actually putting that sticker on there, Surely it's not the artist,
Probably the label. Probably the label. Yeah, I don't know. Usually the sort of thing you come across in like $2 bins
Yeah.
in music stores.
Yeah,
something
sure.
like that.
I've never seen that before, though. That's quite interesting. But kind of makes sense that it would be the label, because they want you to listen to everything else. But interesting that you would have two artists of pretty much the same style of music, like on the same label, if they're
Yeah,
so similar.
I don't know,
But
this-
I know nothing about that.
Well, I don't know. It's just I don't know. It's just people trying to that they want to, like, they like something so much that they want to be that, rather than like being themselves and being influenced by that.
Sure.
And I don't know, you see it all the time, and that's just like problematic in so many ways. Like,
Yeah.
if you're going to be exactly like that, then no one's going to like you as much as they like, the original. It's
Exactly.
like, well, you might be good, but if I wanted to listen to something that sounded like that, I'd just go to Refuse.
Right.
You
Yeah.
know, I
Because
just-
there's something particular about that artist that you're drawn to. Like, you're sort of just completely diminishing the creativity of the other band that's being recommended because you're like, well, you've already been given an idea what that person's like. So as soon as you listen to that other artist, you're like, right, so that's just these guys. Like, again, like what are these people bringing to the table that's not already there for me?
Yeah.
It's a weird concept.
100%. Yeah.
Interesting.
I think, I don't know. I was going to say something. Forgot.
Trains of thought, easy to lose.
Yeah.
Look, Reuben, I don't want to take too much of your time, man. I really appreciate you being here. Thoroughly enjoyed this. You got
It's
a lot
been
of
good.
insight into the creative world, and I think we got a lot out of you. I appreciate you. So I think we'll wrap it up there.
Thank you.
No
Thank you,
worries.
my man.
Yeah, cool. Look, I'm keen to have you on again at some point with Utah and or Theo and get a whole 3/4 chat going. So
That'd be great.
hopefully that's something we can organise in the future.
For sure.
All right, sweet man.
Thanks.
Say
bro.
goodbye to the good people.
Goodbye, good people.
Bye.